Cheat on your wife with mine? I will burn your life to the ground. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our 2 kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself, but since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So, I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-BFs from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch, then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in, and evidently out of, court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them, nothing beyond that. Second story. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already, I wasn't digging the neighborhood. But I didn't have any incident after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supplies pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off, and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years. This house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week and watering my garden, only cost like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90-0 wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting low services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenant were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say. The end. Now comes the third story. Lock my funds because of your mistake. Have your bank's social media ruined? For some reason, God knows why, I thought I'd trust a very small and local credit union with some of my money. When recently my card didn't work on the ATM, I asked for help inside the branch and a clerk gave me a code to use that would deduct cash directly from my account. This is a feature the bank has. I wasn't having special treatment. Fast forward a few days, it seems the bank system flagged my account for review because of some accounting error being late to deduct my balance. I didn't go on overdraft or anything. It was just a minor mistake from their side. And still, for over a month all my funds were locked, and whenever I'd call my bank support I was given snarky responses, sometimes even hinting that they didn't like my foreign-sounding last name. When I spoke to my family back home to vent about this situation, a younger cousin came up with an idea. Use some Russian service that pays people a few Russian rubles, 1 RUB, it's approximately $1 for reference, each time to post whatever you ask them on social media. This service worked like magic. The website even had the option to choose between American-looking profiles and other locales. After the most well-spent $3 of my life and some AI prompts later, the credit union's social media were flooded with hundreds of complaints. I'm sure this got to the right ears because on the same day, the bank's call center manager personally called me to say they understand my frustration, and even if I don't want my account anymore, the bank is ready to initialize a transfer of my full balance, plus $50 compensation to any other bank of my choosing. Problem solved. They probably also realized there was no way to link this activity to me and hence hinted at ending things on a positive note. Too bad I can't tell the Russian bots to remove their posts. That will be someone else's problem now. Fourth story. Classmate got pranked by fake letter after screwing us over. This is a very old event from when I was a teenager in the 90s. There were only a few PC gamers around at the time, and without internet it was hard to get hold of new games. Me and a friend bought games from abroad via airmail because local stores didn't sell many, but these weren't cheap. We'd trade them with each other and would copy the copy protection, which was often included, so this made it semi-affordable for us. A new kid joined our class, however, and his uncle had tons and tons of games we didn't have. We offered to trade games with him and gave him our original copies for him to copy, and in return we got corrupted floppies. Yes, this was the 90s, missing copy protection, etc. And after a few months of this we received not a single working game, while he had received all of our games, the Settlers, Doom 2, Monkey Island games, etc., and some he returned in less than nice condition. We had enough and we wanted to get revenge, but we didn't know how. Now, the 90s were known for the many AIDS campaigns after Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. I was a huge fan of Queen, and this new friend would often mock me for liking a gay singer. He came from a very conservative family and his mother was quite Catholic, and this is what gave us an idea when we had to attend an AIDS event organized by a certain foundation with our class. At the end we were given flyers about AIDS, homosexuality, etc., and free condoms with the logo of the AIDS Foundation were up for grabs. We each grabbed a few for reasons you'll soon reach below. Me and my friend were one of the very few with a computer and inkjet printer at home, so we got this idea to screw him over. We created a fake letter addressed to our friend, pretending we were the AIDS Foundation, copying the logo and everything to make it look as authentic as possible. It went something like this. Dear first name, thank you for your letter. We understand it's difficult being open about being homosexual and you have many questions after the event you attended with your class. Please find enclosed a flyer which should answer many of your questions as well as some condoms. Please practice safe sex at all times. We enclosed all the flyers we had gotten at the event as well as the condoms and mailed it to Mr. Last Name to guarantee his father would open the letter first. We had no idea the shitstorm this would create. We knew him being homophobic, this would be great revenge, but apparently his mother had been in tears, screaming, his father angry, and he was grounded for weeks with his parents convinced he was gay. In the end he figured we had something to do with it because we had been carefully fishing to see if our prank had succeeded, but at first he thought the letter was authentic and we had contacted the foundation in his name. When we finally confessed we had faked it all, we had a nice trip to the principal to explain why we had done this with his parents present. It's still the best revenge I ever took in my life, even though it was 30 years ago. And now, the last story of the day. The title is Though I Played the Long Game. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend and they directed me here. Throw away for obvious reasons. It's a long read, but the setup and backstory are important. 7 years ago I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I had saved for 10 years, worked my ass off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a strata title. For some that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance being taken care of. Strata titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time, found the perfect property. Shared block but freehold title. Only thing that was I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friend to our friend with my friend's type of thing. Didn't know him, but knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, landlord, of the property next to me to discuss insurance. Not a problem. I ask for a copy of the policy so I have a record. It gets sent through and lo and behold, it's for strata insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title but a strata title. I called my lawyer who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but over it all did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold, emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. Despite it being in absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer anything to make things right. I don't begrudge that. He's looking out for himself. I get that. However, I wouldn't forget it. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked for was, when the time came for me to sell, they do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused, offered me $1,000 to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally, and was advised by the mediator to do so, but ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of a bitch. And I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private, saw some photos of a boys on tour trip he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5 to 6 months after I bought the property. I also found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale, for 6 years straight, I sent them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes. Love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had on this our special day and some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. I also from time to time arranged for postcards and letters to be sent from another country, the one he was on tour in, always signed Love, L. I learned about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is not longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out he cheated on her. The story I was told, through said friends of friends, went along the lines of he would get weird gifts and flowers every year, same day, every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realized what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house he had gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife, but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time he'd have been balls deep, sans condom, in someone who wasn't his wife, only 1 year earlier. He's apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little bit guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I'm reminded that he's a scumbag and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful and vengeful bitch.